channel. So finally, it's the end of March, and I just wanted to give an update on my March reading list, what I've been able to accomplish, and what I haven't been able to accomplish, and what I plan on accomplishing. So basically, within the month of March, I've mainly just focused on two books. And the first book is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. And this is a very popular anthropology book, a real bestseller. And the only other anthropology book I've read so far is Guns, Germs, and Steel. But to me, that is the best anthropology book you can ever read because I learned about it maybe in 2016 or something. Or rather, it's not, there is a book, but I watched the 3-part documentary on YouTube. And it's basically answering the question of why is Africa and South America poor? Why are Africa and South America poor? And it kind of relates it to geography, like to geography in terms of domestication of certain plants and animals, as well as certain diseases. And in terms of the geography, it's saying how plants and animals are easier to spread laterally across the latitudes as opposed to vertically across the longitudes. So I found that book to be more interesting, but everyone just keeps raving on about Sapiens. Everyone. Even my dad has that book, right? Everyone really just they love it. Any bookstore you go into, you know how books are normally slotted into the shelf, but there's somewhere you can see the full title page, right? You walk into any bookshop, and this is even in Nairobi, for example. You walk into some of the bookshops, and you're able to see that it's definitely has the full face of the book showing. So at first, I thought it's probably overhyped. I thought I'm like, it sounds a bit interesting, but it's probably overhyped. I don't think it'll be better than Guns, Jumps, and Steel. But once I did pick it up, I was like, damn, this is a really good book. Especially the first 3 chapters were just phenomenally written. This guy is a master storyteller. He's a master wordsmith. Like his mastery over the English language, assuming it's him who wrote the book without a ghostwriter, is really just incredible. The analogies, the examples that he gives, it's like you almost feel like a kid who's going to sit in a circle with your relatives and listen to stories from your grandpa. Like, have you ever seen those movies that start out that way, where some kid sits with an older relative and that relative tells them this amazing story? And that's exactly how I felt reading this book. It is so brilliantly written. So in terms of my tier list of books that are well written and books that I like, it's probably third, if not fourth. The only other book I would say is slightly better than it is The Definitive Book of Body Language, in terms of how concise it is, just because, The Definitive Book of Body Language was definitive, like it was everything you need to know. However, this book, even though it's a brief history of humankind, you can't really summarize history. Like, you can't really summarize history in one book. You can, but he obviously leaves a lot. So, in terms of the progression of the book, he starts by talking about Homo sapiens after they evolved from like Homo erectus and Neanderthals. Well, they evolved from Homo erectus. Neanderthals evolved from Homo erectus as well. I think there was also the Denisovian man, something like that. And he talks about our lives as hunter gatherers. Maybe I can actually do a separate review of that book because I don't want to take up too much time but it's an amazing book. Really, really good book. The next book I was reading was Head First Coding, and I started it out, but it is a bit dense and complex. Like, even the book recommends that it should be the last thing that you read before you go to sleep, otherwise you won't remember what it is you wrote. But more importantly, I've decided to sort of postpone the books that I said I would read on investing. I did finish The 4 Hour Chef by Tim Ferriss, but in terms of all these books on investing, so for example, there was the Essays of Warren Buffett, Interpretation of Financial Statements by Warren Buffett, University of Berkshire Hathaway, Charlie Munger, Complete Investor, and I think there was also 100 Baggers, as well as the little book of emerging markets and one or two other books on investing. So I've sort of decided to take a break from investing books because at the moment I had watched one of the videos by Warren Buffett saying you don't really need more than 3 stocks in order to do well. The premise being that the more stocks you have, the more money you're taking away from the top performing stocks. And obviously, even he doesn't follow that rule because Berkshire Hathaway has like what, at least 10 stocks. But I think 70% of his portfolio is concentrated within the first 3 stocks. That being said, I decided to look more into cryptocurrencies. And the reason being, I think cryptocurrencies are easier to predict in the long term as opposed to companies. It's very hard to say that one company is going to do better than the other. So, for example, you have like the Triple M company, you have shoe companies like Nike, you have food companies like Kraft Heinz, computer companies like Nvidia, you have food companies like McDonald's. Those are just a handful of companies that I would invest in. The others would be Tesla, Google, Microsoft, Yum, which owns KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and others. Samsung as well, but I think it's only available on the Korean stock exchange. Sony as well, but that's only available on the Japanese stock exchange. Toyota, Mercedes, Disney, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, Skechers, Berkshire Hathaway itself, and yeah, I already mentioned Kraft Heinz, but maybe Durex as well. So you see, it's very hard without doing a fundamental analysis or a technical analysis. It's very hard to say which is going to do better. Like, is Nike going to do better than Nvidia and Disney? Because those are very different companies. Like Nike, McDonald's, Nvidia, Disney. Those are 4 very different companies. So, in different industries, all looking very promising, but you'd have to sit down and do a fundamental analysis if you actually wanted to decide which of those 4 is going to give you better returns. So I've just decided that I'm going to put that on hold for now and focus more on crypto. So my crypto split was going to be 70-30 in terms of 70% Ethereum and 30% Bitcoin based on predictions made by Cathie Wood and Vanguard. So I think she said that Ethereum would 75x and Bitcoin would 35x. So Bitcoin and Ethereum still have not reached their ceilings. And I would basically do it maybe 10 to 20% in Cathie Wood's ARK Innovation ETF, and then the rest I would split it 70-30 between Ethereum and Bitcoin. I'm not saying you should take that as financial advice. I'm just saying what I plan on doing. So basically, I figured if I just focus on my quote unquote area of expertise, in the sense that assets that I feel that I understand the most. I'm not saying I understand them better than other people, but out of all the companies, like between Disney and Bitcoin, I think I have a better understanding of the future of Bitcoin. Not necessarily because I don't know about Disney, but mainly because I don't know about Disney compared to Nvidia and McDonald's, but I do know about Bitcoin compared to Dogecoin and all these other meme coins that are out there. So I figured that's what I would do. I would mainly invest in crypto for now, and then I would later on invest in stocks. However, there is actually one or two books, which I think I might read before I read all of those investing books. And that's Stock Market Investing for Beginners by Dave Raymond. And it's a 6-in-1 book, but I'm specifically interested in Forex trading. Basically, I want to learn about Forex trading because I remember that video I watched by Robert Kiyosaki that really touched me, where he said people know how to make money during depressions, that's when some people become even more rich, that you just need to increase your financial literacy in order to understand how money works. And that rings true across the board, because even the book I was reading on commercial real estate says obviously you buy the dip, and one of the first things you learn in stock is to also buy the dip. So at first, when it came to Forex, I kind of thought it doesn't really make sense to be a day trader, and there's not much that goes on in the world in terms of um, events that would significantly affect currencies. However, there was a time I made the video on Turkey where I said they're experiencing hyperinflation, and as a result, you should invest in an ETF. And there's also the Russia-Ukraine war or conflict. I mean, Russia calls it a conflict, but it's a war, I suppose. So basically, from a Forex perspective, from the little that I understand, Forex is about trading pairs. You either bet that the currency will go up or down. So like the Russian ruble versus the American dollar, you buy the pair and you say that you're betting either the dollar will go up and the ruble down, or the ruble will go down and the dollar will go up. Is that right? Or the ruble will go up and the dollar will go down. And once I learned about that, I was starting to think, maybe, I don't know if you could still trade Forex when they had shut down Russia, but if you could, based on the ruble, you could have actually doubled your money, because it lost about 40% of its value. And Turkey is also experiencing hyperinflation. So that would mean that if the currency is going down, if you bought the Turkish lira and dollar pair betting that the dollar would go up against the lira, then yeah, you'd probably have made a lot of money. So those are just the ideas floating around in my head, and that's why I wanted to look deeper into them. Because at this point, I pretty much know like maybe only 10% of what Forex is about. I'm a pure novice, and I feel I already do have a very good idea of how stocks work. So my stock knowledge, I would say, is like maybe 70% of what's out there, but my knowledge about, not in terms of I'm Warren Buffett or anything, but just in terms of the terminology and the process of stock trading, I think I understand it fairly well. Not necessarily how to make good investments, but the process. But in terms of the Forex trading process, I don't really know much about it. So that's why before I read any of these books on investing in stocks. My plan is just to, first of all, invest in crypto and Cathy Wood's ETF. Again, don't copy me because Cathy Wood's ETF might crash into the ground. You know, this is a high risk, high reward strategy. So a lot of people don't have faith in her. You know, she might be too ahead of the times, right? It might be a good idea with poor execution, so it might not work. Kind of like the PSP Go, it was ahead of its time. But anyway, that's my plan for what I'll invest in. But in terms of what I'll read, I will read that book on Forex so that I have a better understanding. Then later on, I'll read the books on investing. And aside from investing, I've lately been more and more into the idea of transhumanism and futurism. So I already read the books on AI, the super intelligence by Nick Bostrom, as well as the AI does not hate you. It's either does not hate you or does not want to hurt you. And I think I have a fairly decent idea of what AI is going to look like. However, that's just half of the story. The other half is what a human's going to look like. So I want to delve a bit deeper into that. I want to learn more about how is it that we humans are going to interact with this super intelligence in terms of cyborgs and enhancements and medicine. So the two books that I've found are Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, as well as To Be a Machine by Mark O'Connell. So those are the two books that I plan on reading probably throughout April, right? Basically, I want to first finish Sapiens, then I'll probably read Homo Deus, which is Noah's predictions about the future, then maybe Life 3.0 and To Be a Machine. Those would be my main priority. The Forex, again, I'm in no hurry with that because, again, this is kind of the nature of reading, at least for me. The only thing larger than my library is my reading list. So it's more of a reading list for the indefinite future because I still plan on coming back to these books eventually, just not necessarily at the moment. Because currently I'm still in Nairobi and I might go to Australia eventually once my braces are done. But I would say I'm more likely to read those books on futurism than I am to read the books on investing in terms of this year. Because this year I would mainly focus on the programming books as well as the futurism books.